First of all, you might ask me why. Well, first of all, why Android? Well, first of all, because Android is the most used mobile operating system. About between 80 and 90% of all mobile phones run on Android. Another reason, basically one reason why Android is so popular is that it's lightweight and it's based on the Linux kernel, which is an operating system that most developers already are familiar with. So when Android appeared 10 to 12 years ago, people are already familiar with this kernel, with the Linux one. Probably most of you have an Android phone and you know that it's developed by Google and is maintained by it. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Basically, in order to work in Android, we need a tool called Android Studio. We're going to install it, first of all. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the basics of Android, how it works, how is the kernel working, what APIs can we call, what device features can we access, things like this. Then we're going to develop a hybrid app. Don't worry if you don't know what hybrid app means, we'll talk about it later. But for now, we know that we develop a hybrid app. Then we'll create the backend. Well, this is a term that I would like to explain now, the backend. Any application is split in 2 or 3 parts: front-end, back-end, and database. Database and back-end sometimes are taken together. The front-end is what you see. If, for example, I go right now to Facebook, this is the front-end. This is the front-end, what I can see when I scroll and things like this. The back-end is the server that is giving me this data. So this is why we can split it in front-end and back-end. Usually there are separate developers who are working on this. There is a front-end developer and a back-end developer. Today we're going to split also our workshop into parts. The front-end one, which is the hybrid app, and the back-end, which is the server part. My colleague Stefan Russo will talk a little bit more about the servers. Also, then we're going to talk about some modern features as mobile frameworks. Flutter and React Native are the most important cross-platform frameworks. Okay, we'll take them one at a time. Don't worry if you don't know anything from here. First of all, I told you, I can't build a car if I don't have a hammer and a wrench. So I need a tool first. Same here with the Android apps. I need a tool, which is Android Studio. How am I going to install Android Studio? Well, it was built in 2013. It is the official IDE, Integrated Development Environment for Android apps. It can be installed on any operating system. And we also need an AVD, which is a configuration that defines the characteristics for Android device. Basically, an AVD is a simulator, if you know the word. It's something that will simply simulate to us the behavior of a real phone. But instead of putting our applications on a real phone, we'll instead put them here in a simulator inside the computer.
Is it like a virtual machine?
Yes, it's like a virtual machine, exactly. Okay. But instead of running Linux, Windows, or things like this, it's running Android. And you can also simulate other things that maybe you don't have on your laptop, like, for example, GPS, tilt sensor, a camera, things like this. They can be simulated if they are not real on the laptop. Thank you for the question. So first of all, in order to install Android Studio, you need 4 GB of RAM, and 8 GB is recommended, and JDK 8 means Java 8 at least. So in order to download Android Studio, we are going here to the official page, developer.android.com. You can search Android Studio download online, and you see here download Android Studio. You can download this one. First of all, we have to accept the terms and conditions, and we'll download it. It's pretty large. It has about 800 megabytes. So if any one of you here doesn't have it installed and wants to try it, please tell me and we can do it together. If anybody wants to share the screen or things like this. Is anybody here who wants to try that? To install it together with us? I will guide you through the steps. It's okay, but if anybody wants to try. Don't be afraid.
I already have Android Studio.
Okay, so anybody who doesn't have Android Studio, please raise your hand if you don't have it. Okay, one of you please share your screen and I will guide you how to install it. I don't know. David, I see your
it
hand.
right now.
Can you share your screen, please?
Me?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, go to the first link. And you have the button here, download Android Studio.
Oh. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. And then we'll have to install it too. And where you have to install it, you will have some options. Okay, I will show you here the options. You have here, you have to click next, and then you have to install both Android Studio and the Android virtual device. As I told you, the Android virtual device is that virtual machine, as your colleague called it. It's kind of a virtual machine that simulates Android on your computer. So you have to install both of them. And it will require about plus or minus 3 gigabytes, something like this. Okay. You will see that you have to specify the install location, and it will create a start menu folder. And basically that will be it. You'll be able to open Android Studio after that. Now, while you install it, I will talk to you a bit about Android Studio. You can just listen to me. No need to watch the screen, because you can right now install it. If you have any questions, ask me. Okay, so right now I will just talk a little bit about Android Studio while we start. If you have any question, please raise your hand or simply say something, interrupt me, and I will help you. Okay, so this is Android Studio basically. You can see it's an IDE where you can do multiple things. We can write code inside it, but you can write code in any environment. You can write it in Visual Studio Code, even in more primitive tools like Notepad and things like this. So that's not a big deal, the fact that you can write code. What Android Studio really brings to us very powerful is the debugging part and the build part. Basically, right here, I can simulate something on many devices. I can simulate it on even on web browsers. I can simulate, because you know there are some frameworks which can also work in cross platforms, like in web browsers or in mobile devices. But let's start with the AVD. I already have an AVD configured here, Android virtual device with a Pixel phone that is configured. That is the default one. Sometimes if you click on one, you might see an error like unable to locate AVD, but it will still start. You see down here starting AVD, and this is the AVD, Android virtual device. This is it. You see, it's exactly like a normal phone. I mean, if I open something like YouTube on it, for example, you can see it's the same as a real phone. I mean, it simulates perfectly what a normal phone is doing with other things. It's like having your own phone, but instead of using it on a real device, you use it in the browser, in the laptop here. Okay. This is how the AVD looks like. And now if we want to run the app, we can also run it on the mobile device. We'll have the code here that right here in the left side, we can see the files that we are using, the Java files or the Flutter files, or depending on which framework we are working in. We can see the files, and up here we can see the build options. Right, we can build the application, we can debug it, we can do a lot of things. Okay, we can also do operations with GitHub that my colleague Stefan will talk to you a little bit later about in 2 or 3 hours from now. We'll talk about GitHub too. But we'll stick to Android Studio for the moment. Right now, I'd like to ask if there are any questions, if there is anybody who had problems installing it, any errors, stuff like this.
I have one question regarding some license agreement.
Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
I don't know where, what licenses to accept and what to not.
Well, click accept on all of them if you have no.
Okay.
Anybody else having questions or problems or things like this?
Yes, me.
Sure, please.
I have
share
a
your
question.
screen.
In what languages can we code the game?
Very good question. Well, we can code in Java mostly. It's mostly Java. This is the main. This is the main programming language that Google supports. But there are other options. You can code in C++, some parts of it, if you want, and you can also use another framework, another language that Google developed now called Kotlin. And also, if you want to use a framework, because we are going to talk in the end of this workshop about frameworks, you can use other languages that you are familiar with. For example, JavaScript in React Native, or you can use TypeScript, which is also in React Native, or you can also use Dart, which is a framework, which is a language built by Google for Flutter. Flutter, which is a framework that we're going to talk about in the later stages of this webinar. What languages are you most familiar with?
C++.
Okay, C++. Okay, C++ has a lot of object-oriented programming features in it. You know that C++ came as a superset of C. So basically it added object-oriented programming to the C programming language. So if you know C++, you will probably understand very easily the concepts of Java, because Java is an object-oriented programming language. You know, Java is more modern than C++, has more features, and is more object-oriented than C++, which is a mixture between a classic one, an imperative one, and an object-oriented one. But the transition from C++ to Java will be a pretty easy one. Trust me. Basically, the syntax is quite the same with some small differences, very small. But talking about the syntax for basic operations and things like this, Java is pretty similar to C++. Also, I think that you also studied in the high school HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? I mean, web. You created a website or things like this?
I did.
Okay, if you created a website, you use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript?
Yeah, I know, and I know Bootstrap mostly. Yeah,
Cool.
I know, kind of. I love.
It's funny because we are going to use Bootstrap today. It's funny.
Oh, that's great. I like it.
Yeah, I'm going to talk. This is what a hybrid app means. But we'll talk about that when we get there. If there are any questions regarding Android in general or Android Studio for the moment. Răzvan, I see you have your hands up.
Da, sigur. Cât timp ați făcut partajarea pentru n-am putut să văd nimic, era ecranul negru și... Da, atât.
Ok. O să te rog să vorbim în engleză, dacă se poate. Mersi. So, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So in order to download Android Studio, you have to go to developer.android.com/studio. It's this website put here. You can see it here. And you will click on download Android Studio. You will accept the license. Yes. And you will download it. And that's it. And then you will run the installer. And the installer will take you to various steps. You have to click next. Here you have to make sure that you check the Android virtual device too. That's very important. And then you can go next. That's the only thing that you have to do. Make sure that you have both Android Studio and Android virtual device here. And then go next on all of them. Is it clear now?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Since there are no more questions, I guess we can go further and talk a little bit about Android. Well, as I told you, the main languages supported by Android are Java and Kotlin. Okay, Kotlin is a little bit more modern than Java. It has some new features that I won't like to go into too much because it's pretty different from C++ that you already know. So I'm going to stick a little bit to Java. Java, as you know, it's an object-oriented programming language, meaning that everything in Java except some numbers and some characters are objects. Have you ever built objects or, as you know, a class or class in C++? Or did you heard
Yes.
about the term structure?
Yeah.
C++? Good. The structure is something primitive that was before objects appeared. Objects are similar to your structs, but more complex. They can have their own methods, constructors, and things like this. I'm going to talk about them. Also, as I told you, there are a lot of cross-platform frameworks developed by most large companies. Facebook developed React Native, Google developed Flutter with Dart, Microsoft developed Xamarin with C#, which is the language, and Cordova, PhoneGap, and Ionic are all maintained by the community, and Cordova was also developed by Adobe for a bit. But those are community more. But I thought there are three main frameworks supported by large corporations, those three, and the two official ones. So depending on what languages you know, you can easily find a solution. Okay, now you probably heard me a lot speaking about hybrid. Well, what is a hybrid app? First of all, I'm going to tell you three types of Android apps. First of all, we have the native apps. By native, I don't mean only Android, I mean Android and iOS. Native means I write the code in Java for the application. Then if I want to create the same application for iOS, bad luck, I can't. I need to rewrite the entire code into the iOS language, which is probably Objective-C for now. Okay, or Swift, one of them, depends on which one we are going to use. So we have two separate codes with separate implementations or separate platforms. You might ask me, why would anyone do that? Because it's fast. It's faster than the compile time. When you build a code specifically for a platform, it will be faster to access the local data. If you have an application, let's say like a camera or something like this, like Instagram, for example, if you have Instagram, you don't care so much about the performance. You don't access sensors or things like this. So you can build it either hybrid, either cross-platform. But if you build an application like Snapchat, if you've heard about it, which is focused entirely on the camera, it will be better to use a native environment, iOS or Android, one of them. Separate codes for each one of them. Hybrid cross-platform application, I told you, it's one single code in Flutter or in React Native or in Xamarin or things like this that can compile on both platforms. Now you say, hey, that's better. Why would I need something else? Well, when the same code is running on two platforms, we'll have some issues. You don't access the camera the same in Android and iOS. It's not the same. That's the issue. The protocols are different. The devices themselves are different. Even the architecture of the operating systems are different. So for most applications that don't require too heavy computations or too heavy resource allocation, like sensors, cameras, I don't know, other kinds of sensors that you have on your phone, like tilt, geolocation, things like this, it's better to have a cross-platform app because you only write the code once. And now we have the middle solution, which is a hybrid app. Hybrid apps are pretty much preferred when we are somewhere in between. I mean, I will use some resources, but not too many. And I would like to share my code from one platform, but not all of the code. And today we're going to talk about a hybrid app. What does hybrid app means? Well, let's consider the fact that you develop a website. Okay, I'm going to go on our faculty website, which is this one. Okay, this is our website. I would like now to create a mobile application starting on the content here. And let me think. Do I access the camera? No. Do I need any sensor for this? Sure not. Do I have anything that can be different between Android and iOS? Probably not. And now we have the fourth question, which is pretty important. Do I want to use the same code for web and for Android? And for mobile, sorry, because we're talking about Android and iOS. And if you say yes to this question, then it'll be a pretty good idea to use a hybrid application. If you say no to this idea, you'll have to see, do I want to develop a cross-platform one, with the same code? Probably yes, since you don't access too many native resources. Also, some cross-platform environments, some frameworks like Flutter, can also compile on the web, but the web performance is worse than HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. They are still the kings. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are still top when it comes to web development because most of the websites are built in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that you learned. Obviously, with frameworks like React, Angular, Vue.js, Meteor, and things like this. Okay, coming back to our issues, today we're going to talk about hybrid app. So you can see here the comparison between them. A hybrid app is simply something in between. So you will basically create yourself a mini web browser that will be native for both Android and iOS. You have different web browsers, right? Like this. So we are only going to develop a web browser, and inside that browser, we are going to run our website, which is in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Any questions until now?
I have a question about if we could combine, let's say, hybrid with cross-platform. So, like that, I don't know.
How would you like to combine them? I mean,
Like if we could combine HTML and CSS and then add JS plus the TypeScript, let's say, and kind of like that, or Dart.
yeah, here's the funny part about hybrid apps. As long as you can present to me a website, I don't care what it's written in. I don't care if the website is in React, it's in Angular, it's in Vue, it's in TypeScript. The hybrid app doesn't care. It works like a browser. As long as that site that you present is working on Chrome or Internet Explorer or anything like this, it will work in your app. He doesn't care what you do. That's the thing.
Okay.
I mean, he only wants to see a web page. How you build that web page, not his business. All he does is behave like a browser. That's all he does.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Any questions? Okay, since there are no more questions, we'll talk a bit about Webview apps. We'll develop a Webview app, and we can read a little bit about what a Webview app is. Going on the official documentation, you can see that there are a lot of apps built in Webview. In the initial phases of mobile development, even Instagram was built as a hybrid app. So basically, we're just going to build a browser that we're going to use to navigate to our website that we develop. So you need to know a little to know Java, just basic Java in order to create that window where we are going to use where we are going to look to access the web page. And that's all you do in Java. After that, you use the technologies you know, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. That's the main reason why I decided to go on this approach today. Is it okay for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Good. So first of all, we are also obviously going to develop the WebView, the so-called browser. That is not the browser. It's a WebView. It's a miniature version of a browser. Okay. Then we're going to add required permissions. Well, any app, when you install it from Google Play or anything like this, you will see that you have some permissions. Internet, camera, stuff like this. Okay. Good. And then we're going to develop the core web app, which is the website itself that you're going to display. We're going to create the HTML for the structure. Then we're going to use JS to create the logic. I mean, if we click a button, we will do something. And then we'll add the style with CSS. And that will be it. That will be our first Android application. What are we going to build today? We're going to build a newsfeed app. I mean, I will have a page where I can log in, a page where I can register, and a page where I can look at news. Similar to what you see in Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, news applications that you have on your phone, Google News, stuff like this. I'm pretty sure that everybody knows what a newsfeed is. You need to scroll in Facebook. That's it. Okay. Clipboard, other applications are working like this. This is how it will look like. basically. We have the welcome page, we'll enter our email and password, and if we can log in, then we are going to access the main newsfeed. Sounds cool? You wanna start working it, or you want more time to look at the concepts and things like this?
I think we can start work on it.
Nice. Okay. So right now, first of all, we are going to create a project. Okay, we're going to click on File, New Project. We'll add an empty activity because we'll develop everything from scratch, as I told you. We won't use any template. We'll click on Next. Give him a name, give him whatever name you want. I'll call her Hardcore Entrepreneur App. That's how I'm going to call it, but you can give her any name you want. And I'm going to save it somewhere in my computer. You have to choose a location. That's basically it. Okay, I'm creating a new folder. Okay. The language selected is Java. You can select between Java and Kotlin. We're going to use Java, and the minimum SDK is Android 16, which is AP16, sorry, which is Android 4.1. A pretty old one, so that all the devices can run it. I'm going to click Finish, and wait for Android for 1 or 2 minutes to download the libraries, things like this. Depends on your internet speed, on your computer, and things like this. It takes a while. You can see down here that I have a progress bar that shows me how much to download it. Okay. Okay, now it's downloaded the Gradle, which is basically the wrapper that is around the app helping it. Okay, we are waiting for it to build. I told you to take about 2-3 minutes, this operation. So while it's doing this, feel free to talk with me about whatever you want, to ask me questions.
On the minimum SDK, we choose the Android 5.0.
Sorry, can you repeat? Yeah, you can use whatever you want, as long as your device that you are testing on, your phone or things like this, has a newer Android than Android 5, which I'm sure it does.
Yeah, it's at least 10 or 11,
Yeah.
I think.
Then you can even put 10 or things like this, but we usually put the lowest available one.
Okay, I'll leave it on 5. Thank you.
You can do it on whatever you want. It's okay. Okay, so now you can see that in my computer it finished. While you are still building it, I will take a look here and talk a bit about it. There are 3 folders here. We don't care about Gradle scripts. This is something that he's using for now. For the moment, we won't talk about that. We are later going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, so we have the manifests. A manifest is, do you know where the word manifest came from? When you ship something in a container, in something like this, when you ship to the post service, you have a manifest on each container, which says, in this container, there is fragile stuff coming from New York to Bucharest. Something similar is here. He will tell, the manifest will tell to the end user, to the end device, or to the compiler, what is inside this app. Well, what's the icon? What's the label? What's the name of it? What's the theme that it's using? If it's allowed to work if it's allowed to have backups or not, and what actions will the app take? Out of the files that we are building, which is the main file? Okay. Not much to talk about the manifest, to be honest. And now you see here, we have the Java file. This is where the Java files are located. I'm going to talk a bit later about it. First, I'm going to res. Res means resources. And we have the most important resources, which are layouts. This is the layout. this is our layout as it looks like. Basically, every Android app that is built will look like this. It will have a hello world in the middle of it. Let's run the app and see if it really displays hello world. This is where we are designing the app. This is the design part, and Java is the logic part. That's similar to what in web you see with HTML and JavaScript, where HTML is telling you how the app should look like. JavaScript is telling the app how to behave.
So basically in the app we have CSS in a more interactive way.
Kind of CSS combined with HTML, yes. Kind of that.
Okay.
And now this is my app. Because I didn't do anything, it's just the basic one with hello world on the middle. That's it for the moment. Nothing special. Going further, we need internet to it. So in the manifest, we need to tell him something. Hey, I need to access internet. We'll copy this line. I will tell you in a second. I'll give you in the chat the line that you need to add in the manifest. Give me 1 second, please. Okay, I'm going in the manifest here. In the manifest, I'm going to write right here.
I have a problem with it doesn't want to load practically. That's what I wanted to say, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
What doesn't work? I will stop my share and please share your screen.
Practically, do I share it right now? Okay. So practically, it doesn't wanna load.
You need to wait some time.
Okay.
It takes a while.
Okay.
Probably it's the first time when you build an app or things like this, and it will take a while to load it. Okay, right now in the manifest, I added up the permission. You can see here. Now, if I will install the application on a device from, let's say, Google Play, when you install it, it will request permission to access the internet. And now my app will have access to the internet. Good. It's the same app, just with other permissions. Okay. Moving forward, let's go to the layout and add our web view. Here, we will delete the hello world. We don't care about it anymore. And here in the palette, we have a loop icon. Avem o lupă, a search icon. And we'll search for web view. You see that it's only one result. We'll drag and drop it here. Right now, you see we have a web view here. Well, and this is where the part with design ends, because this is our app. It has a web view. Switch to the code part. This is how it looks like. You see, it's kind of a HTML with a little bit of CSS combined. That's what XML is. Okay, right now, we need to make sure of two things: layout width and layout height. This is the width and height from CSS. It tells him how big to be. In CSS, we'll use 100% to fill the entire screen. In Android, we have match underline parent, which means be as big as your parent is. In this case, the parent is the entire screen. Okay, now we have the styling of the app done. And we need to assign him an ID, first of all. Assign an ID to this one so that we can refer to it. Android. Every keyword here starts with Android. Android.id is plus ID / I don't know, my web view. Something like this. You can put in any ID you want, but make sure that you will remember it. Good. This doesn't do anything in the interface for the moment. This is something that we will refer in the code part, in the Java part, for the logic part. Okay, you also have this in the PDF and you will receive this PDF. So let's analyze what we have to do. Let's go to the Java file. Main activity, see here. Super.onCreate. This is something built by Android Studio, which is telling the app to create a new instance. And set content view is telling him which is the active page. Basically, this is something that we won't modify at all, and we write our code after this. So, first of all, we are going to make a reference to our Webview. We're going to declare a Webview variable. Call it what you want. L dot. Give me a second. I'll give you the code in a second. Let me put it in the chat. It's here. Okay. But I will also write it. I will not copy paste it. Okay, it's the function find view by ID. And here you're typing L dot ID dot my web. You see it already appeared because it's the only element that has an ID. We are also going to tell him now to load a URL. Okay, for the moment, I don't have any local file, any URL, so I'm going to load a random web page. Put whatever you want to. Load my faculty website. And I'm going to paste those 3 lines of code, which are the settings part. I'll tell you immediately what it does. Well, here in the settings part, give me a second. In the settings part, I'm going to have 3 things. First of all, to allow to access the URL files. I mean, to access any file that is on my machine, on my Android file, because we're going to develop it locally. We don't have a server for the moment. Okay, allow content access to access any kind of content, images, CSS files, stuff like this. And set JavaScript is enabled. This is the most important one. You need to tell him, hey, the application that I'm building will have logic inside it, will have JavaScript. You need to allow me to use it. And let's run the app with what we have until now. Yes. Wait for a few seconds. And right now, yeah, I think I pasted the wrong URL, but you see that this is exactly how Google Chrome will show to me if I have a problem. This is like a web browser. Our browser is working. Good. Right now, we need to create a local file, another file.
May I interrupt you a bit?
Sorry?
May I interrupt you for a bit?
Sure.
I don't think you gave us permissions to see the chat.
Oh, okay. Then we will post the code in a GitHub.
But can't you see the chat? All the persons, if you click on chat,
I don't have the chat button.
Okay.
I have the chat button, but it doesn't allow me to press it.
I'm
I
sorry.
don't have a chat button.
Okay, then I'm going to spend some time on the code and let you do a screenshot of things like this, please. Then are you all in the support groups, in the WhatsApp groups?
Yeah.
Yes.
I will send you the presentation there and you have the code in the presentation. Give me 2 seconds.
I'm not in the WhatsApp group.
Please join them. There were some WhatsApp groups for support.
What I have to do, please?
You have to enter on the website of the project, Punctul IT point club.
Okay.
And there you have a link somewhere.
Okay, thanks.
The link is on contact. So click on contact from the menu and down you have join us. You can ask questions on our support group. And just click on the first link.
You can see here, contact. And here's the support WhatsApp group here. This is
Yeah, I think I don't know what there are two support groups. I don't know what is the link or the button for the second support group. But all the information are put on both support groups. We are already too many, so we were forced to make two support groups.
Can you repeat, please, what I have to write?
You have to go into punctulit.club/contact. This is the URL here. You got to go, and you have here the links to the WhatsApp groups where we post the support. I mean, if you have any questions or things like this, we'll answer to you here. Since we are too many for one group, there are two groups, but you will be redirected to the one that is available now.
I think it is okay, the one who asked, isn't it?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Okay, I will send the presentation again on all groups in 10 minutes after you all join. Since I sent it already, but I think you can see the conversation. So in about 10 minutes, I will send it again so that I can wait for other ones to join the group. So it's okay for you? Until then, just watch what we are doing. It's okay?
Yeah, it's okay. I'm looking for the link.
Thank you. So right now we have to create the HTML part. Okay. Let's see where we can put it inside Android Studio. Give me 1 second. Okay. Okay. I'm going to click on File, New Directory. Give me a second. It's something here. Okay, here. We can use a directory right inside this, or a package. Doesn't matter too much. So we are going to create a new directory called assets. Sorry, not in here. I'm sorry. We need to put it here in the app part here. So we are going to click on new directory assets. And wait for it to be created. Okay, now you see that it was creating assets. Okay. Now I have to open the new file, the new folder here, show in Explorer, and it will show to us where it is located. Get inside it. We're going to create a new file in which we are going to call index.html. Just create a new text file and change the extension to HTML. Okay, now I can see it's opening with a browser. Obviously, there's nothing inside it. So we have the HTML in which we'll write the code. So this is the first checkpoint. Did you obtain the HTML file inside the application? A blank one, doesn't have anything in it. Now we have to change a little bit the Java part. Meaning, we will no longer access the URL from remote, and we're going to access our URL from here, from the local part. It's file android asset.index.html. Let's run back here. Sorry, let's stop it and run it again. And we see a blank screen. This is our application for now. Now we have the HTML, just as a small part here. I will do something that you don't need to do just to test it. So don't mind me with what I'm doing. I will just edit it. You can open it with Notepad, Visual Studio, anything you want. I mean, it doesn't really matter. What I'm going to do is this. Sorry. Okay. I'll just do that to test it, just for testing purposes. Okay, now I'll run the app again. And we can see that it's working. We can see what I wrote here in the app. That was a checkpoint that I had to reach. So from now on, that was it in Android. That's it. Now we'll have to write in HTML, CSS, and things like this.
What do we do if the directory isn't showing up, the assets directory?
Can you please share a screen, because it's pretty hard to understand.
Sure.
Okay.
See, it's not showing up.
Right click up on the app part here. Right click, new directory, and type assets, and click on slc/main/assets down there.
Oh.
Click and enter, and it created it.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Sometimes it requires like this. It doesn't want to just type.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can we do it in HTML if we want? He interrupts me and there's a problem with share, and I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, so what is the question? So what is the problem? I really didn't understand you. Dacă voi poți să zici în română, care e problema?
I have a question.
Okay, yes.
We can only make the game on Android Studio, or we can use other apps?
Everything that you want. We'll present to you only some technologies. I mean, my colleague Robert presented to you last week Meetup Inventor and Tankable, and I think tomorrow or the next time have a webinar will be presented Unity. But if you want to use something else like Unreal Engine or things like this, go for it.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Any questions? Okay, right now we are going to talk a little bit about HTML.
I'm sorry, but I have one.
Sorry
to interrupt.
No problem.
I saw that for coding language there is something called C and hashtag next to it.
C#, yes.
Yes, C#. How different is it from C++?
Well, C#, even if it sounds like C++, it's not really the same. C# is Microsoft's alternative to Java. I mean, it's an alternative to Java. It's also an object-oriented programming language, which is pretty similar to Java. It was developed kind of in the same time. When Sun's Microsystems was developing Java, Microsoft saw it and said, hey, we need something similar, so let's develop C#. So it's similar to Java. Yes, both of them share features with C++. A lot of features are shared.
Does it work like C++, or do you code in a different way?
Well, the only different thing between, let me share my screen, between C++ and the object-oriented programming languages is that here, if you can see, anything needs to be inside a class. You can see here have the classes. You can't just write the code, give me 1 second, like this. I mean, I can't declare a function how you had in C#, in C++ you had int main and things like this. I can't do that in Java. Everything, or in C# or in any other object-oriented language, I have to put anything inside the class. That's the only thing. That's the only difference. The big difference. Other difference are the fact that mostly everything is based on objects. I mean classes like this. But in the syntax part, I mean, doing basic operations like going to an array, adding numbers, handling strings, they are pretty similar. The strings are easier to handle in Java, it's true, since Java doesn't have pointers. And C#, when I'm talking about Java, I'm talking about C# too. They don't have pointers. They handle this automatically, so you got rid of the pointers most of it. That's the biggest feature. But if you know C++, you know the logic, you know how to do a loop, you know how to do a for, a while, an if, you know how to do those stuffs. If you also use classes or structs in C++, then you also know something about object-oriented programming. So there's a pretty great chance that you already know the principles of Java and C# without actually knowing the languages. Did I ask your question? Did I answer your question?
Well, yes. Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Can you see the screen?
Yep, we can see.
Okay, thank you. So right now let's talk a little bit how we can make it easier for us. First of all, we are going to use Bootstrap. Some of you say that you already used it, and this is perfect.
My favorite one.
Nice, like you. Okay, so we're going to go to W3 Schools. This is a website. You can simply search on Google Bootstrap Get Started. Bootstrap Get Started. And that's all you have to do. Okay. And we'll go to W3 Schools here, which is Bootstrap for Get Started. And we're going to copy the last part. Give me a second. Here, the container part, the container fluid part. This is the default Bootstrap page. This is how Bootstrap page looks like. So we're going to simply copy paste this one here. But as title, can give him the title news feed or just news feed. Okay, we'll save this file and we run our application. Give me 1 second to rerun it. Okay, you can see that this is how the template Bootstrap page looks like. Okay. And now we successfully installed Bootstrap in our library. You know that Bootstrap has a lot of things built in. I mean, we no longer have to create styles for tables because they're already styled. We no longer have to style the buttons because it's already here, everything. We no longer have to care too much about the style of a form. Let's say, give me 1 second. If you go to inputs, okay, if we go to here, we can see how the inputs look like. They look very professional already, without us taking too much care of the style. Okay. Other features of Bootstrap are the grid systems. The grid system is the thing that made him famous. If we look here, you can see that the grid, I mean, the screen itself is split in 12 parts. And we can say for each element how much of the screen it will take. A few megabytes, a few columns, 100, sorry, not 100, 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, all the way up to 12. It depends how many. Okay. Usually the desktop applications are split in 3 columns usually. Each column has a span of 4, but this is subjective. Everybody can do as he or she wants. Doesn't care too much. In our examples, being everything on a small screen, we won't use the grid system, but it's something that you can read a little bit about and try it out because it's pretty cool. Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have to go. I have some meditations and stuff, private school stuff, and yeah,
okay.
I gotta go. Sorry.
Okay,
Bye.
good luck.
Thanks. Bye.
Welcome. Okay. So we are now going to take a look a little bit about the forms in Bootstrap. We already have here a login form. Well, since today's workshop is not too much about style and things like this, since that is a subjective thing, we're going to simply take this form. We take the code from the form here. and put it inside the container fluid. You already have in the presentation the code that you have to put in here, in the HTML file. Good. I also have to close this div. Okay. Okay, now give him a bit of formatting. In a second, let me put it in a way in which you can understand it. And we're going to talk a little bit about him. Okay, now I think you can understand it more clearly what it does. We have three groups, three form groups in which we have the inputs, the email address input, the password input, and the remember me button, which we won't use too much, to be honest. We can actually delete it if you want. And we have the submit button where we can click when we save the application. So let's give it a try. Okay, this is how our application looks like. And for now, it's a login form. Any questions till now? Good.
So basically, what the code does, it does stuff. It
yeah, basically what the code in HTML does is to describe the interface. H1 means heading, means to add a large text here. Good. Okay. Form means a form, un formular pe românește. This is a form. It tells that we have some fields here. Div is division. It means that on this part of the screen, we'll have something inside. What we'll have inside? A label, which is this one, email address, and an input. An input which is exactly this field. And same for the password. The difference between them is here we have type equals email and type equals password. Well, if we say type equals password, whatever I write, I'm writing 1, 2, 3, 4 right now, but you can see they are hidden. The written before is hidden. You can see this is what the password field does. It hides the value. Okay. This is what the app should look like until now, and it looks like that. We remove the remember me. Good. Right now we'll talk a little bit about JavaScript. Well, in Java, right now we have the email and password fields, but how do I validate them? Well, that's the main problem. We need a server for this, but we won't use a server for the moment. We'll just mock the server. We'll just say that, hey, somehow we have the login. Probably in your applications, you will not have a login if you don't have a server. So we'll just simulate this part. Okay, in the bottom of the file here, I'm going
May
to
I interrupt you for a bit?
Yep.
How do we run the AVD?
From here, you have this button here with a phone and the Android logo near it. It says AVD Manager, and you have a list of them and run it.
Oh, okay, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, since Bootstrap already integrates a framework called jQuery. Sorry, did you say anything?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, can you send again some links, please, in the group?
Yep, sure. Give me one
Okay,
second.
thank you.
Okay, I see that some of you joined it. Okay, I resent the PDF file. Okay. So right now, the username is telling him to take the value from the email field, which he has here, the ID email, and the password should take the value from the password. From now, we have those two values. And from now, it's something similar to what you did in C++. You can do whatever you want with them. Well, what are we going to do with them? We're going to call a function called Ajax. I will talk in a few minutes about Ajax. For now, just think that we are calling this function with those two parameters. So, talking a little bit about Ajax. It's asynchronous, JavaScript, and XML. Now you might ask me, okay, there are 4 words. I have no idea what they mean. Okay, and you know what it means. Okay, asynchronous, first of all. If you read the Legends of the Olympus, you know that Chronos was the titan of time. If you count the time, you use a chronometer. Aveți un cronometru, a stopwatch. In Romanian, chronometru. Well, chron means time, usually. So, asynchronous means not in the same time, basically. Async means non-synchronized, and chronos means time, a non-synchronized time. It's handled in different times. Okay, so you might ask me, what do you want from me? Well, let me give you a real-life example. I'm on this page here, and if I look on the network part here, I can see all the requests that this page is doing to various servers. You can see here that each request takes time. This one takes 1.16 milliseconds. This one takes 0.68, so on. Okay. This one takes 4 milliseconds. You say, hey, that's not a big deal. Yeah, it's true. It's not. But when you put all of them one after the other, you end up with seconds. Even more, if you add everything here. So this is why we came with the idea of asynchronous, async. It will be referred as async, so that we don't spend time pronouncing asynchronous. Okay, so async is doing something in the same time, is doing multiple things. Basically, what I'm doing now, if you see, I will refresh the page. They are starting to come, but they're not coming one after the other. Some of them are coming at the same time. You can see here some requests. So Ajax does something like this. It creates a new thread. I think that you know about threads and processes inside your computer. If you click the Ctrl+Delete and click on Task Manager, you can see here your processes, things like this. Yep, give me a second. You can see how many of your RAM, things like this, are occupied, things like this. And you can also see background processes and stuff like this. For example, Google Chrome right now has about 17 processes running in the background. Edge has 38. Other things from here have 6. Visual Studio has 6. Okay. So this one here will start a new process to request for this resource. That's the same you do when you upload something or you send something to the server. This is basically the standard right now. Until 15 years ago, something like this, or 20 years ago, everything was done synchronous, meaning when you had to send something to the server for validation, you would have had to wait. How much? A lot. How much time? Well, I'm sending it, server is processing, I have to get it back. Okay, in all this time, your interface was blocked. You couldn't do anything else. In Ajax, asynchronous, this is not blocked. Nothing is blocked. I mean, it opens a new thread, a separate thread that can be blocked, but it's not altering the main interface. The main interface can continue to run when I'm sending data to a server. I can do other things here by waiting for data to be sent. I don't have to block the application. That's the main thing here. Since we don't have a server, there is a famous mock-up server on the internet which mimics a server. It's this one. example.com/script.php. It does nothing, but it just allows us to send requests to him. How many we want? We can send requests to him. Consider that this is our login server. Okay, a real login server will respond with actions like, okay, login failed, something like this. In this case, this will always respond with the example. But in our key record, we won't validate any email path, so this is just for the sake of the exercise. So we are going to use this placeholder server, example.com/script.php. We are going to make the request to it, send us data, the username and the password. We tell him don't process data because anyway you don't do anything. We don't have any special type of content, and the request is post. Well, what's post? There are multiple types of requests. There are 4 of them: get, post, put, delete.
May I ask another question?
Sure.
But can't we use a local domain?
A local host?
Yeah.
Well, if you are going to put everything on your phone, it will be pretty tricky to connect to localhost. You can, You can search on internet, you can do that, but it's pretty tricky. For the sake of this exercise, we won't, because it will take some time. But yes, you can. But it's not the goal of this exercise. But yes, you can. If I'm looking here, for example, you can search something like this: Android AVD connect to localhost server. Something like this you can do. And you see that there are solutions online. This is the address that you have to make the request, 10.0.2.2. Sorry. This is the URL where you have to do a request in AVD. Okay? So there are ways to connect to localhost. It's okay. Right now, talking about HTTP methods, there are 4 request types: get, post, put, delete. The get is used to retrieve data from the server. I mean, when I have to only get something from there, I use a get. When I have to send something to a server, some data, I use a post. When I'm uploading something to a server, I'm using a put. When I delete something from the server, it's a delete. Here we use the post in order to send the data to the server. And we also use get later on. Okay. Back here. Now we do the request. And it's all, and if all is working okay, we will redirect to a page called main.html, which we haven't created yet. We'll create her in a second. But let's give it a try for application. It will probably direct us to an empty page or a non-existing page, we'll see. So I'm saying here test around test.com and password 1234, something like this. And it directed me to the page that doesn't exist for now, which is okay. Okay, right now we'll create the main page. We'll have the newsfeed itself. So right now we'll take again the Bootstrap get started code from here, and we'll create the second page, the newsfeed page. There it is. We'll take this example for the second page. Go into the assets and creating a new page. Main.html. Yes, it can become unstable, I know. And we'll open it with Visual Studio Code or whatever editor you use, and let's see how it looks. And right now, when we run the application, it will redirect us here. Yes, I want to terminate it. Okay, I think there is a small problem. Give us 1 second, and have main.html. Here's location. Sometimes the changes don't take place instantly. There's a problem. When I do something in HTML, it's not necessarily propagating instantly to the Android device. Okay, we'll have to wait for a few seconds. If there are any questions until then, until everything's synced here. Where did you end it up? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
There are some students who have their hand on raised.
Oh, okay. So we have your hand raised, Pedro. I selected the first one.
I tried to run my application, but it says no error running app, no target device found.
You don't have the AVD, it means virtual device. You haven't started the AVD. I haven't created one.
Oh. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Alexandru? Babu?
For example, if we have already an website built, can we implement it in an application?
I didn't understood what type of website, sorry. What kind?
I don't know. I think that it will work the best to create a website on Wix and after that to copy the HTML file and to paste it on here. It will work.
Wix is working a little bit different. It also has a server, but with Wix, if you want to build it with Wix, okay, it's more like a drag and drop tool, but Wix itself will not give you the source code of it, will not give you the backend. So instead of writing the road URL here, file Android asset main HTML, you go to your website, which will be something like wix.com/my website 1234, something like this. I hope this doesn't exist. You copy this link and put it in your application here instead of the URL. You understand? Because Wix will provide you a URL where you can host it.
Okay, understood. Thanks.
Yeah, you want to download. He won't give you the source code. Trust me, he won't give you the HTML, not the backend part. And without that backend, he won't work. Okay, right now here, I no longer care about the login part. I showed you how the login part works. And we want to skip directly to the main part. I will set here main.html. This is the new file. So you see how to create a login form. And now our main goal of the app is to have a newsfeed page. Okay, this is our newsfeed. Okay, now it's not a newsfeed, obviously, it's just a text. It will be a newsfeed. So let's see what we can do here. Okay, good. So we did the Ajax part, and now let's look a little bit about the cards in Bootstrap. I want the news to be put in cards, like this one here. So let's see here, basic card. No. I want a card with an image, this one. And this is the card that we're going to use. We are simply going to take this code from here. Okay, I think I already put it here. Yeah, I put it in the presentation too. You can copy paste the one from the presentation. And let's just paste this card here, somewhere here. Paste it without doing anything for the moment. Okay, let's just give him a try. Let's reload the application. And this is how the card looks like. But instead of John Doe and things like this and this image, we'll have some news here. Okay, so we'll have a list of news of cards like this one. Good. A small observation. In images here, I see pixum.photos, so on. This website, pixum.photos, will give me a random picture every time I access it. So let's see if I will go here to give you this image, but on the same URL here gave me a different image. So yeah, we'll get random images for now. I mean, we won't take the real news images. I don't want to see info about war or things like this here. I'll take random images with computers, flowers, stuff like this. Okay, so this is our first card. This is something that, well, you might say, why do I need cards? Well, I'm not forcing you to use cards, but most modern applications, if you look at them, are structured in cards. I mean, let's go to Facebook. I'm sorry, Mr. Zuckerberg, that I'm giving you app as an example, but you can see that here, this post is a card. This menu here is another card. This one here is also another card. And the friends list is also another card. So basically, you can see everything is split in cards. So in social applications and stuff like this, a lot of things are split in cards. Okay. So it's a pretty used design pattern, this one. Okay, now we need to get the data from the server, but let's talk about it a little bit later. First of all, let's build a card with a given title and a description. In the file here, we need to create a script. In the script, I'll put a JavaScript code. I have the function build card. Well, build card will take me this code that is building a card and replace the title and the description with what I give him. What I give him here. With title and description, my parameters here. Okay. That's what it does. Right now, we'll no longer need this one here. And let's see what's the next part. We'll have to do a request to the server. For debug purposes, let me leave the card here for a few seconds. A request to the server means that we get data from a server. Well, accessing a real server, we need some knowledge that we are going to learn in a few minutes about servers. So right now we're going to simulate this server using this link, jasonplaceholder.com.typical.com/posts. This is a mockup server on the internet, which is simulating me a news application backend, a server. So it will return to me some news. Okay, don't mind the title and the body, they look pretty weird, they are in pseudo-Latin, doesn't care, it's just something to have a placeholder. But we're going to use this. So, making a GET request to the server, we will basically be able to retrieve this data. So, we're going to use .get, $.get, after this one here, dollar here. Okay. Have the $.get, which we get all the data that it has on this address. You saw the data, how it looks like. And we are going to do something like this. Let me explain this code to you for a second. Okay. Okay, first of all, we get the data and say, what do we do with this data? Well, we have a lot of articles here. We have a lot of articles. You see, there are a lot of news. So for each one of them, we use a for loop. You know for loops from C++. We use a for loop to iterate two of them. So we will go to them here. And for each one of them, we're going to access the title and the body of the news. Okay, we're going to pass the title and the description to the build card function. And we're going to add that HTML that we got here into this element called demo. So let's give it a try. Let's see how it works. Just for a small test, I'll first open it in the browser and see if there are any errors. You see that there is a small error. The get is not a function. Okay, I think I fucked up something. I think jQuery is not put here. Give me 1 second to check something. I think I forgot to add something later in a second. I have the jQuery. This okay. If you have any question till I solve this, please. No questions? Okay, so the problem that I had was that when I wrote this tutorial 1 month ago, there was a different jQuery version on there. So I will have to go to this one. Instead of having the 3.6 version, the most stable one is 3.1.1, a pretty older one. So we can replace here this part. This was I had the pretty old version of jQuery. That was my problem. So right now the code you see is the same. So if I just hit a run on the application, we see here the newsfeed part. We have some cards with news on it. I told you the images are random images taken from website.
Yes.
So, and the data is taken from the placeholder server, JSON placeholder here. And now running the app, you can see the final result, which is our first newsfeed application. This is something that you can use. You can use this template that I gave you here for social networks, stores, stuff like this. You can use this template and modify it as you wish. Basically, this was the presentation about hybrid applications. And we just passed our first mission of today. So respect everyone here. Now questions. I will give you the entire code of it. I'll make it on GitHub. We'll talk about GitHub later. So
I have one question, if it's possible.
You want to share your screen?
No. It's about the app. Do we need some sort of agreements or something to actually use these apps on our phones?
You mean the URLs and things like this? No, it's not commercial. I mean, you don't make money out of this thing. You don't post it on Google Play. But even that, there are a lot of things which are open source. Everything that I used here is open source. Open source means it's free to use no matter if you make money or not. If you will use something like data from Facebook, data from Microsoft, or from other big corporations like this, yeah, they will have some plans that require you to pay or something like this. But as long as you use open source things like projects built by the community, by small devs, you don't have to pay anything. You understand?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes. If we make our app on Tankable or MIT Inventor, can we access the code and just modify some fine things? Because I think it will take a long time to build a complex app here without coding experiences and knowledge.
App Inventor and Tankable are just for kids. You won't be able to modify the code as far as I know. They are just teaching purpose applications. For the major applications, there is no big application built in App Inventor or Tankable. None. Zero. All of them are built either in Android Studio, either in Flutter, either in React Native, either in Xamarin. So that is used only to demonstrate the purposes. You can build a simple app in App Inventor or Tankable if you want, but it will be a simple app. That's mostly used for the participants here who are in the general school under the 9th grade or something like this. And for high school, it will be okay. You can use whatever you want. I mean, I'm not trying to influence or things like this, but use whatever you feel more close to your skills, to your preferences, things like this. But I think that this is how real applications are built. It's okay?
Yes, thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay. If there are no more questions, we'll have 2 more modules today. One will start now with the backend part. I mean, we'll talk about servers a bit. And from 13 hours, from 1 o'clock, we'll talk about GitHub. It will be a short introduction in GitHub, and you'll see how to use it. It's a tool in which you can post your code. You can have multiple versions of it without creating more folders on your computer or things like this. So if I can right now, it will be my honor to give the microphone and the screen to my colleague, Stefan Russo. Ciao, Stefan. Okay. We'll guide you to the Java part in creating a server. You have the mic.
Okay, thanks. Good. So, hello everyone. As my colleague said, I am Stefano Russo. I work as a full stack software engineer at TaskByMag. That means that I build both the backend and the front end part of the app. Okay, and today I will briefly present how to create a REST API and the basics of API creation. And after that, I'll show you how to use, after a small break, I'll show you how to use Git, GitHub, and other versioning platforms. Okay, so have you heard before about APIs, or have you used APIs before?
I have heard about them, but I didn't use them.
Okay. Good. First off, the project that I will write or present today is on GitHub. I've put the links for it on the support groups, but when we get to the coding part and at the end, I will send them again so that you can, maybe read that code in peace at home after this session. Okay, so what's an API? An API, in short, is an application programming interface, which basically means that you have a set of instructions that will help you achieve, so to say, certain things that you want from your backend. Usually backends are built using some design patterns, and usually they are not called APIs. They are called REST APIs because they follow the REST guidelines. And that means that we have for each object or model that you have a few, or a set of operations that you can make on them, such as creating, deleting, or updating the fields of that object. Okay. For today, we'll build a REST API that handles the creation, deletion, and other REST operations for a news app. So as my colleague presented you, basically instead of using that mock or demo API, you could use an API that you write in this fashion. Okay, mostly APIs use the JSON format. It's the JavaScript object notation. Before this, people used to use XML for transmitting data from their APIs to the front end, but that used or is quite inefficient because you have to send a lot of extra data for your object, and that uses quite a lot of bandwidth, so that's not really good for your server if you have a high throughput. So JSON was used after that. JSON is quite a simple format. If I show you some, I think I have some JSON around here. Let's take a peek on Google, some JSON examples. Okay, so this is how a JSON looks. You have a key on the left side, and then you have its value. So in this case, for glossary, you have this value, so to say, that has inside of it another key and some other value. So this is the title key, and the value of the title key is example glossary, which is a string. As you've seen, you said you wrote C++ or things like that. You have in JSON kind of the same variables, so to say. You can have strings, integers, which is like numbers, because you don't have long or integer or things like this. In JSON, you have double or floats. You also have lists, which are defined, as you can see here, with square brackets, and you can have also sub-objects, so to say, which are defined with I don't know the term for this in English. Accolade.
A bracket.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Good. So if you take a look on a website, let's say, let's go on incognito now, and let's go to emag.ro, and let's inspect what this website is doing. If you take a look on the network and I refresh the page, you can see that it requests a bunch of things, such as images. You can see here this PNG, maybe this has a preview, this image, you see. Okay, the website can make multiple types of requests, such as images, but for the APIs you have, let's see if we have some API requests here. I don't think we do. Anyway, when you make an API request, you have some metadata, so to say. You have headers for that request, and you have request and response headers. You can see here request and response headers. And these contain like certain values, such as cache control, or this, for example, tells the browser how to handle that content locally. So you see this has an age. I think this is seconds, if I remember correctly, and the browser will not request this resource again. It will just take it from cache, so that it will save you some bandwidth. As you can see, this website has 3 megabytes in size, but the second time when I reloaded it, it just requested 800 kilobytes because the rest of it was cached. So you can use headers like this. Okay, let's go back to the slides. Good. And probably now you're thinking, well, how do I write some Java code so that I can create an API? Because that would be quite complex to handle all that logic on your own. In vanilla Java, you would have to write quite a lot of code. So this is where Springboot comes in. It's a Java framework that helps you write production grade backends and APIs, REST APIs as a consequence. And it has a lot of boilerplate code that you don't have to write, you just use annotations, and you'll have a way better backend than compared to what you could have wrote on your own. Yeah, so as I've said, it's a well-known framework. It's quite widely used in the industry. Companies like Netflix, Emag use it. They've ported from PHP to Spring. Also, being now Spring has some new technologies, so to say. Instead of using the JVM, you can compile it to an executable using GraalVM, and that would be native. You wouldn't use the JVM, so that would be a bit faster and a bit lighter on the memory of the server. Okay, and now for the demo, we'll write, as I said, some code for an API that would generate some demo news. To create a Spring project, you can go to start.spring.io, and this tool will help you create your Spring project. You have here on the left Maven or Gradle project. It's just the build tool that will be used to package your project. You can use either one of them. The language, you can have Java, Kotlin, or Groovy. Spring, it's used not only for Java, it can also be used for Kotlin and Groovy, but at the time of speaking, Java is the most popular one. You also have multiple versions of Spring. These are the snapshots, and M2 are we could say unstable, so I recommend you use 2.6.6 or a later one 2.5.12. Then you have some package metadata. You have your group name, so you'd have your company name here. So for example, for your project, if you decide to create a backend in Springboot, you would put your team name here. For the artifact, instead of demo, you would have your app name. So for example, if my team is called Fields, I'd write Fields here, and for my artifact, if my project is called, I don't know, Dogs Quiz, I'd put here Dogs Quiz, something like this. The description is just your description of, is just the description of your project. So you'd have Dogs Quiz REST API, and you'd have your package name, which is generated from the things above. Then you'd have to choose which packaging method you'd want, var or jar. It's usually a jar that is mostly used, so I'll just stick to that. And for Java versions, there are multiple versions of Java, 8, 11, 17, and 18. You'd have also the numbers in between, like Java 9, 10, 12, 13, etc. Java 17 is the latest long-term support Java version, so I recommend for new projects you'd use Java 17. Good. And for your dependencies, such as external packages, you can add them by clicking on this button, Add Dependencies. These help you, like, enrich your Springboot app. And if you'd want to create a REST API, you just type here REST, and you'd add Spring Web. And if you have a database, you can add the JPA and then your database type. So if you have SQL, you'd pick an SQL driver from here. If you want an in-memory database, such as the one we use now, you'd just type H2 and then add it here. JPA is just the persistence API, while the H2 database or SQL or whatever you pick then is your database like type. The first one just tells how to map the object to the database. The second one is the API for the database to actually save the data there. Okay. If we take a look at this project, you can see that we have multiple branches here, because I've written, I think, 5 versions of this project in order for you to have a better understanding of how things work. We have the master branch with like the fanciest code that will be common with the live demo and the tests one. The tests one contains the usual code, but it has also tests written for it. You'll see that when you start to write complex applications, you'd want to have some tests for them in order to make sure that they work as expected for certain use cases. We have an H2 branch, which contains the code where the news are saved in the H2 database. It's just an in-memory database. You don't need to install anything extra. You just run the project and the database will be started automatically. And for the quick demo, we just have the same project, but without a database. It just uses a mock database, so to say. You have an array list that's in memory, and you have like operations similar to the database, but written by hand in Java. Okay. As an editor, I'll use Intellij. You can download it from here. It has 2 versions, Community and Ultimate. The Community one is free. The Ultimate one has a 30-day trial, but after that you have to pay. So I'd say you install the Community one. It's very similar to Android Studio, actually Google-based Android Studio on Intellij idea, so that's why they're really, really similar. Okay, do you want for me to wait while you install the community version, or you want me to write the code and talk on it like while I'm writing it? I mean, you want to write it with me, or you just watch and we discuss it? I think it would be easier for you to just watch and discuss it, because it's some high-level stuff, and I think it would be easier for you to understand if you just pay attention.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Okay, so this is how like a base Spring project looks like. I have some services already written so that I don't have to write some boring stuff. I just write the REST logic so that you can understand how that works. Usually in Spring you have you'd use MVC, that is model view controller. Hence you'd have packages like model, view, controller, service, facade, and repository. So let's create the repository first. Actually, let's create the models first because I need the models in repository. In the models package, you'd have your objects. If you wrote some OOP programming, you'd be kind of familiar with this. The model is just your usual Java object. So if I have a news API, I'd have, for example, 3 models: an author, a comment, and the news itself, like the article, so to say. Okay, so I'd put these 3 objects in the model package because they are models for my API. So I have the news, which is the one that would contain some comments and the author of that news. And I'd also have the author and the comments. I'll just create the empty ones now, and we'll link them together a bit later. Okay. So as I said, for my news, I have to have a few fields so that I can, display this data through my API. So I'd have an author, the one that, wrote that piece of article. So if you go on a news website, you'd see that it has, let's go on a news website. Let's go here. Okay, so if you go on this, hopefully it's some text, not just video. Okay, so you have a title, and then you have an author, and then you have the content of the article itself. So my news object would be equivalent with that entire page, so to say, the data of that entire page. So that so then I have to have an author. I also have to have a list of comments, because as you've seen on YouTube, you can comment on articles or videos. So I would like to have some comments stored in here. I would also like to have a title for my news. So I'd have a string field with the title. And let's also have the article body, which would be again a list of strings, because I want to have paragraphs so I can display them from my front end using a for loop or something like this. I don't want to have like the entire thing in just a string, because I'd have to parse the spacings between them so that I can separate them again. So I'll just store them as a list of paragraphs. So it's a list of strings and it's a body. Okay, so this is how my news object looks like. Good. Now I have to, as I said, I have to store this in the database. So I need a few extra fields and annotations on those fields. So to store some things in the database, they need to have an ID so that I can identify them and cross-reference them from other objects. So let's write this ID. It would be an integer that would be incremented by the database atomically. So if I add 2 articles at the same time, they won't have the same ID. They will have, like, one would be 7, for example, and the other one would be 8. The database is smart enough to do this atomically. Good, so it's a private long ID. Okay, and the object is still not ready for the database because I have the JP dependency, and I have to tell that, well, what's my ID field in this entire object. So I have to annotate this ID with ID. Okay, and I also have to tell it that I want this ID to be dynamically generated because I don't want to handle this on my own. I don't want to have a global counter or something like that. And I'll say generated value. And I have to say how to have this value generated. So I have a strategy and generation type identity because it's the ID of the object. I don't think I have though the JPA dependency, so I just add it now. I've seen that I don't have the autocomplete on those things. Okay, let's just okay. Now it should like a bit better that those annotations. To add the new package in your Spring project, you just go to your Gradle file and you usually Google the name of the package that you want to add, and then you have to refresh it. As you've seen, I've clicked on the top right button, so that Gradle knows to refresh those things and download your dependencies. And now if I go here, I should be able to import those. Okay. Okay. I don't know if you've done like database object relations, but you have, as you've seen, I have an author object here, but I also have it here, and I don't want to store each author again and again in each news object, because if that author changes its name or something like that, I'd have to update millions of records. So I just create two different tables. So each model will have its own table in the database. And I just have to link them with secondary keys. So I have to tell JPA to do this. And in order to do this, I just have to use an annotation one-to-many, one-to-one. The author would be one-to-one with the news because each news has only one author in this case. For the comments, I have one-to-many because I have multiple comments to each news, and the same for the body. This actually the body won't be in a separate table, so I'd have to use another annotation called element collection because I want to store this in the same table as my news. It would make no sense to separate the bodies of the news in different tables because they won't be present anywhere else. So I'll just keep them here. And I also have to tell the JPA that this would be a quite larger or not so used size string, because my body, you'd want to read quite a bit about that news, so it would be a bit bigger. So I have to tell him to use a custom column definition, which is, you have varchar for columns or things like that. This would be n varchar of max. So I'm telling him just, the maximum that you can store, just make sure that this field is of that type. Okay, if you have any questions about this, I know it's a bit, it's quite a lot of like new information. So I strongly suggest you rewatch the stream or in whatever form this would be present on YouTube, and try to take a look on the project on GitHub, clone it and play a bit with it so that you can understand better those things. Okay, so any questions?
None at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Good. So I have to also write the comment class and the author class. The news class is quite done. I just have to tell it that this is a database entity, so I have to annotate it with the entity annotation. And also I have some Lombok.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I have some after school work and I need to get out of this.
Okay, if you have to leave, you can like just leave. Don't.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Goodbye.
No worries. See ya. Okay, so I have to tell JPA that this is a database entity. So I have to annotate with the entity annotation so that it knows to scan this and make sure that all these other annotations, one-to-one, one-to-many, and so on, are parsed correctly. Okay, and I also have some, because I don't want to write a lot of code for this, I don't want to write getters and setters. I can use Lombok and that will write all those things for me. So, and I'm also going to use the builder pattern. So I'm just gonna annotate this with builder and data. Sorry. Okay, and two more annotations: no args constructor and $args constructor. Not that one. Okay, and now it's a bit happier than before. It just tells me that I don't have an author entity object. I have the class, but it news being an entity and using the mapping one-to-one, and author not being an entity on its own, so it's not going to be a table at this moment. I have an issue with that, so I have to create the author class and put all the fields on it and the annotation. So I'm gonna tell that this author is an entity. I'm also going to use all the other annotations from news because I want the same functionality, and it's again an error because I don't have an ID for this. I also need an ID, as I've said before. Each object that is stored in the database has to have an ID. So I'm just gonna annotate this with ID. Actually, I can copy paste this from here because it's going to be the same logic. Those IDs, like the ID from the author and the ID from the news, won't be like incremented. If I have a news with ID 1, I have the next author will have ID 2. These will be separate because each table has its own counter, so to say, and I can have a news that has an ID 1 and an author that has again the ID 1 because I will tell from which table to take the respective data, so the IDs will overlap. Okay, and my author will just have a name and a description, so it's just a string name and another string that's gonna be the description. Okay, and for the description, let's say that my author wants to have a larger description, so I just have to use the same column definition as before, just tell the database that here it's legal, so to say, to store a longer string than the good old varchar. Okay, and I just have to write my comment entity now, and everything will be fine after that. I can just take again the same annotations. You'll see when you're going to write code for a company or something like that, or your own project, it's usually quite nice to copy paste things if they are written correctly in the first place. Okay, and I'll have the same ID for the comments. It's the ID one is quite basic. Good. Now each comment will have an author, and it would be quite nice to have the same author object as before, because I'm a bit lazy and I don't want to write a comment author model, so I'll just use an article author like the model, because they can be different. They'll just be different types, not different fields in the author. And I'll have again a one-to-one mapping, and I have to, again, if you take a peek in the news, I have this comments list, so I have to wait, I think it's a bit, I was writing the author here, the comment, sorry. The comment has to have a body, because otherwise, I just have an author for that comment, but the comment will be empty. So on YouTube, you want to have a comment that has some text. I don't know. You want to tell someone that you want to join fields, and you have to have that text that says, let's join fields. So we have to have a body for that. So it's private again, string, and the comment body. And same as for the author, I would want this to be a bit longer than usual, so that you can write why the first thing that you said is actually great or something. And you'd have to use again n varchar max. If you use a different database, for example, an NoSQL database like MongoDB, you don't have to have such specifications like the column definition that is custom for longer strings, because that is just a JSON database and it can store without any issues longer bodies, like you don't have to specify that. Okay, so that's quite about it with the models. I just have to write now the service for my news and repositories for my models and the controller, so that I can access the data from the database using an API manner. So I'll just write my repositories now for news, author, and comment. The repositories just tell Spring, I have those objects and I want to store them in the database, and I also want some basic functions on them. So let's create the repository package. And in here I'll have 3 interfaces. Repositories have to be interfaces. News repository, usually you'd have the model name and then a repository after that. Okay, let's create all of them first, and then we'll just write the code for them. Comment repository and author repository. Okay. So this is just an empty interface now, but I want to use the JPA functionality. So I have to extend the JPA repository so that I can have the basic functions that I've told you, the get, create, update, and delete functions. I don't want to write them for each object. They're quite similar, so I can use this JPA repository and have those functions written for me. So it's news, and then the type of the ID. So if you take a look here in news, my ID is of type long. So I have to tell the repository what object to store and what type of ID it has. If my ID would have been of type string here, I would have had string here. But my ID is of type long, so I will have long there as well. Okay, and the same for comment. I'll just copy paste this, but instead of news, I would have a comment because it's my comment repository and I want to store comment objects. Okay, and same for author. Okay, let's import this. Let's format the file. Good. So now I have my repositories. In your repositories, if you take a look at the news repository, you can write some custom functions. For example, if I want my API to return all the news, but using the author ID. So I want, for example, let's say to get all the articles that I don't know, my colleague Alex wrote. So he would have an ID, for example, I don't know, 35, and using that ID, I can use JPA and my database to get all the articles that he wrote. So I would like a list of news to retrieve from my database all the news or articles that he wrote, and I want to find all of those using his ID. So I would have find all by and then author ID, because he's the author of the things that I want to get, and I know his ID. And I would have to pass an ID here, so author ID, his ID. And then I can use this function. You see it has no body, but JPA will take care of that, and I will be able to use this and retrieve, as I've said, all of that information. Okay, now I will write the service for my news. It would contain the functions that would use the repository in order to get the data from the database. So in the service package, I will write my news service. And I also have to tell Spring that this is a service and it can be injected in my application. So I have to annotate it with the service annotation. And in order to have my dependency injected nicely in this class, so I don't have to write my constructor, I will annotate this with required args constructor because I don't want to use the auto-wired annotation. And I need my repository, so I need to have my connection with the database. So I have a private final news repository, and let's give it the news repository name. Okay, and now I need to write my Java functions to use this repository in order to get my data. So let's first off get all the articles. So I would have a public function that returns a list of news because all my articles are a list of things that are news in this case. And let's name it get all. And this should be pretty simple. I just use my news repository and it has a function already written by the JPA interface that is called find all. And this will just return a list of news and I have to return it. So if I take a look in my news repository, I don't have a find all function. So you see I'm calling here a find all function in this news repository, but I don't have it here. This is how a JPA repository works. I just have some basic functions already present for me in this repository. So I don't have to bother writing basic functions such as the create, read, update, delete ones. Okay. Let's also write a public method that adds a news. So I want to add a news to the database and I'm going to call it add. I'm also returning a news object so that when I add a new news object, I would get back that object that was created in order to make sure that that was actually created in the database. And my repository will return this for me. And it would also attach an ID to it. So for example, if I want to create a news, I just send it in JSON format, author, comments, title, and body, and the ID would be generated for me because I've said it's a generated value. And I would return this because I want to maybe see that ID or make sure that that object was actually created. So I have to return again news repository and save, I think it's the name of that news, and this will return me a news object, the one that is saved in the database. And maybe I want to add multiple news at the same time. It's the same thing, public and then a list of news, because it's the same like add but for a bulk of objects. Add all, and again my list of news that I'm going to receive in order to add to the database. I'm going to call it again news, and I'm going to return news repository, and I have a save all function again already present there for me, news. Okay, and let's also write some remove functions. So it's going to be, those will not return anything. Usually maybe you want to have a bool to know that it was actually removed or not, but in this case I'm just gonna make them as voids. So I want to remove my news using that ID, and I can just use the repository again, and I have delete by ID. And I just pass in that ID there. And I want to also remove all of them. For example, I don't know, I want to remove all the news from my DB. I'm just gonna say remove all and no parameters because I'm deleting everything. News repository, delete all. And it's again written for me. Okay, and now I just need to write two more functions in order for this to be a functional API. I want to use that function from the news repository that I wrote here, find all by author ID, in order to actually get the things that my colleague wrote, for example. So I have a list of news because maybe he wrote multiple things. Get by author ID. It's usually nice to use the same names in your service as you used in your repository and as you will use in your controller. And I want the ID. This ID is the author ID. As I've said before, if my colleague has the ID 33, I would use this ID and check each news to see do you have the author ID 33, and if yes, I would add it to this list. And I just return news repository, find all by author ID, the function that I wrote earlier, ID. And let's also get one news using its ID, so it's gonna be news, get long ID, and news repository find by ID. I should have a function, and this would return an optional, not a type of variable that you've seen really often, because if that object does not exist in the database, I don't have something to return, so I can just use or else throw, so I can throw an error. In this case, I will not write that error, but you can use this type of logic in order to get things by ID from your database. Okay. Do you have any questions so far? Okay. Then I will write the controller, and then I will show you how the tests look for this type of backend. So I have to create a controller package, and my news controller class here. And same for the service, I have to tell Spring that I need this injected in the application, so I have to map it with an annotation. So it's going to be REST controller for my annotation because I'm writing a REST API. And let's say that I want to find this API at localhost 8080 /API /news. This is where my controller will be, and each of the functions will have its own request mapping so that the server can differentiate between the things that you want. And same as before, I require the constructor so that I can have my classes injected here. So for example, I want my facade that I already wrote here in order to have some dummy data in my database, and my news service in order to have my CRUD operations. So private final, my facade, and also my news service. Okay, and let's write the actual controller endpoints. So as I've said earlier, in REST you can have usually you have 4 principal methods: get, post, put, and delete. So we'd write at least one for each of them. So I'll have a get mapping on the path generate. In order to initialize my database, I don't want this to be automatically. Usually it's cleaner to do with an SQL file, but in this case I want to have each time some random different data. So that's why I wrote that custom facade that I'm not going to go into, but you can have it, you can read it by checking that GitHub link that I posted on your support groups. Okay, and my generate will return a list of news that were generated when this endpoint is called. Let's do the imports. Okay, and let's give it a name, generate news. and I just have to return a call from a function from my initial SSL generate news that will return me, if you take a peek here, some authors with some news with their authors and the comments of each one. Okay, and now let's write all the other mappings for, or actually I can just swap the branch so that you don't have to watch me write those. Let's commit this real quick. You'll learn about commits a bit later. I'll just swap branches so that I have only 10 minutes left. So I'll just explain the controller code a bit. So if I go in my controller on use controller, okay, let's pull the changes. Okay, I have my endpoints. They will have some colors after my editor decides to index them. Okay, so I have get mapping, as I've said. You have post mapping annotation in order to create post requests to this endpoint. A delete mapping. I don't think I have a put mapping because I don't want to update any news now. That would be a bit more complex, and I didn't want to bore you with that. And as you can see on your path, you can have some odd things between brackets, such as this ID. And this will be parsed by Spring as a path variable, and you can put it in the head of the function of the controller, and it would be parsed by Json from a string to a long, so I can specify the type here. Same for post mapping. You can see that I have this list of news. This would be passed as a request body. So in my request, the body of the request would have a JSON with a list of things that is news in this case, and Json would know and would parse that to a list of news object. Good. Let's take a quick look at tests, and then I'll just demo you how the API works using Postman. A quick word about Postman is just a tool that is quite used to test and create APIs and see how they work. You can have multiple customizable things such as authorization, your body, which I've talk to you about here. So for example, my list of news would have to be in a body of raw type and then JSON so that I can send that data. Okay, now back to the test. There are two types of tests, integration and unit tests. Unit tests just test parts of your code, such as some functions from your services, and the integration tests test an entire flow of your application, such as on the backend integration test would look something like you would mock a request and you test the controller, the service, and your database. So you would actually perform that request. Usually test names use a standard that it's called when then. Sorry, I have. Yeah, you can name them like when you have some event, then you want to check some things, and this is how you write an integration test. You can see that it actually performs a request at the given path API news generate, and it's an integration test because it tests my controller, my service, and the insertion in the database, and I check that value. This is a really simple test to not have nulls in this, but if you want to make it an actual correct test, you have to check like more specific what's in this list of news. And for my unit tests, I have some unit tests, again, really simple, not null checks for each service, like author service, comment service, and news service, if they generate a list of size greater than 0. Okay, and you can run all your tests if you right click on the tests folder and then run all of those tests. Usually you want to have all your tests passed before you commit things. So you've seen all of my 5 tests were ran, and no problems with them were found, so no assertion failed. Okay, and now let's just start this API, this backend. I'm just gonna move to my main class, which is here. It's written by the test one. It's written by Spring for you if you don't have some custom configs, and it's just a usual main Java class that will run your entire server. It will start a Tomcat server for you, so that you can use the paths, so to say, that you wrote in your controller to do things. So in Postman, you have on the right the type of request: get, post, put, delete, and all the others that are less used. So if I take a look in my controller, let's take a look in the news controller. I have the get mapping on generate, so I have to use a get here. If I had the post mapping here, I would have had to use post. Okay, localhost 8080 is just the domain name. This being a local server, it's on localhost and it's listening on port 8080. As you can see, the first request mapping of the controller, so API /news, it's just that path here. And then the path of the function, which is generate. So if I send the request to this, if I actually send the request to this, I should receive a JSON with my dummy news, so to say, that contain an ID, an author, as I've said in the model, and some comments. Also title and the body. Okay. And each author, as you've seen in the model, has on its own another ID, a name, and a description. And if I take a look at the get all news, it should return the same thing because this initializes, but this would be used on your front end. So usually in your actual backend, you wouldn't have an initialized thing. You would just use SQL files. Okay, and if I want to get like one article, I just use the API news and then the ID. I can put here 10, and I would receive the 10th article that was written or saved in that database. And the get by author ID, for example, if my colleague has the ID 2, I can just send that like this, or if it has the ID 33, as I've said, or 35 earlier, you just do that there and you receive a list of the things that he wrote. In this case, he just wrote one article, which is this one. And it has the ID 38. You see the article has the ID 38, the author 35, and I wanted the articles that were written by an author that had the ID 35, so that's correct. Okay, and I think that was about it with writing APIs in Springboot. As I've said, you should take a look at this repo and rewatch the recording because I know it's quite a lot of new information for you, and I guess it was a bit hard to understand what's happening around here.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Awesome presentation.
Thanks.
Do you guys have any questions? Did you understand the ideas behind this Spring? Is anyone still online?
I, for one, don't have questions.
You don't? Or you do?
Yeah,
Okay, nice. Right now, I'd like to ask you one question. I hope Dino won't get mad at me. Did you use any other kind of backend language like PHP until now?
No, I only have experience with the C++ and C#.
Oh, you wrote C#? What did you write in C#?
I work in Unity, well, not for long. For
games. I understand. Game development. Nice.
Yeah.
You will have tomorrow, I think, the Unity
Yeah.
workshop.
I have,
Yeah.
for that.
Okay, now what Dino said was perfect on the backend part. So if you follow his tutorial step by step, you'll be able to create any server for any application. What I'm going to talk to you a little bit about now is something that will take no more than 5 minutes or things like this. Sorry. I won't like to take more than 5 minutes from you because you need a break. We'll talk about the following thing. We told you about how to do the front end. Okay, it's an app in the browser, it's a mobile device, something like this. Then there comes Dino with his API, which is relying on the server, which is connected to a database. Cool. Those are all going to the internet. That's also nice. But what if you want to have the same app on multiple devices? What if I want my same source code to run both on a device, on a smartphone, or depending on his operating system now. Depends if it's an Android one, iOS one. In the past, we also have Windows Phone, but thanks God it's dead. So now I have Android and iOS, and also we have some other operating systems. What if I want to build a native application on Windows, or a native application on Mac, or something for the smartwatches, or if you have a modern car, you have Android Auto too. And you also have Mac applications. How are you gonna do that? Well, writing a simple code, it's not that a single code for all of them is not that simple. You saw that even if I wrote everything here in JavaScript, I still need this container here, this browser, as I called it, officially called a Webview, but I called it a mini browser for you. Okay, I still need a little bit of code, not too much, to be written in native stuff. And now, what we're going to talk about in the next 5 minutes is about cross-platform solutions and what are they. So, I don't want to write any code for other platforms. No, I want one code for all platforms. Going on the JavaScript approach, this can be done. And we're going to talk a bit. I won't do any kind of code with you. I'll just talk about the principles. If you know JavaScript and you feel like you are familiar with it, you can give it a try to React, first of all. Anybody heard about React until now? I recommend you, if you are interested about this, to go to a website called Codecademy and try to look at the React tutorials here. They are pretty good. I learned React from here. React is a framework which was built for the web initially, for the web only initially, so for web pages, in order to manage the state of the applications, in order to allow easier rendering, in order to make everything more dynamic and easier to write and understand. When they saw the huge success that React had, becoming the most used framework in the world, they said, hey, what if we can do that on mobiles too? So this is when they came with the idea of React Native. I really encourage you to take a look here, even if you don't want to learn it, just take a look at it. The syntax is pretty simple. It's kind of a HTML, kind of. It's a custom built HTML called JSX, JavaScript X, it's called the language. JSX is kind of a HTML adapted for all kinds of devices. If you write an app in React Native, you have the same code for all platforms. That's the big shot of React. Basically, React is working dynamically. It can update everything instantly without you taking care of how we did here in the code, updating this. You no longer have to call this function anytime. Whenever you update the state, whenever you get a new data in the app, it does it automatically. So everything that you see here in React will be like 3 lines of code with the set state. Who's using React? Everyone, basically everyone. You can see here all the large companies: Shopify, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Tesla, a lot of websites. This code is built in React. I mean, the entire Discord client is built in React. Skype, a lot of them. Magento, all of them. are built in React. Another option, if you want, would be Flutter. As I told you, React was built by Facebook. Flutter is built by Google. If you want to take a look on Flutter, it's pretty different and it will be a little bit trickier in the beginning because of one single reason. It's based on his own programming language. Flutter is not built on JavaScript. It's built on a language that looks kind of like an enhanced JavaScript. It's like the JSX that you took in React, but mixed a bit with object-oriented programming concepts from Java. It's a language like no other else, but it's challenging at the beginning. But once you learn his concepts, it's pretty easy to use it. So basically, all you have to do would be to write a single code. You can see here, this is the code. You build a scaffold, which is this kind of app with an app bar and the text. And the body is exactly what's here. This is how a code in Dart looks like in Flutter. This code will be automatically translated to all kinds of applications. So I will show you right now how an application can work in both native and in, give me a second, and in web. In the same time, same application, same source code is available both in web and in Android. You can see here, this one is hosted on the web, but the same app looks the same, feels the same in the Android browser, in the Android app, sorry. One is an APK, the other is a HTML file generated by Flutter. So this is the main advantage. As you can see, the apps look pretty similar. Not the same because they have different screen sizes, but they are similar. This is what I wanted to talk to you about. This is how an app looks like in Flutter. You can see that you have the same interface, both for mobile and for web. Same interface. Two platforms, one interface. And this can extend to any platform, Flutter. Android, iOS, web, native Windows, native macOS, and in the future, Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. So this is the third option for building apps, which was the cross-platform framework. This is it. This is the top of the development part. Write once, deploy anywhere. Some people say this is the future. Some people say it's just a trend that will pass. I don't know. A lot of companies are starting to shift from native development to cross-platform development. So the trend looks like that Flutter and React Native are here to stay. They are not like passing trends that will die in 2 years. They look like they're here to stay, and more frameworks appear. Also, Angular is thinking about creating a mobile version. Ionic is also another framework developed for cross-platform. So this was my speech about cross-platform. We won't get too much into the code here because I told you it's a whole different language. But if you want to search online for Flutter or React Native, please feel free to do it and ask us questions on the support groups and things like this, because it really is a cool concept that will end up very used in the future. Now, we would like to thank you very much for your attendance here. We would like to say a huge thank you. We also have another seminar from 13 hours right now in 25 minutes, something like this, about GitHub. My colleague Stefan also will teach you a little bit how to use GitHub, how to post your code on a remote repository, how to keep versions, how to keep track of what you change. If you work with other people in the team, you'll be able to know who did the changes. You know, when something goes wrong, you know who to fire from the company. Just kidding. You know exactly in what version a bug appeared. You can merge multiple source codes into one, and you can work together with your colleagues on different parts of the code without altering each other's code, without sending you archives, copy paste, things like this. This will be the tutorial from 1300 hours. So if there are no more questions, I'd like to wish you a very nice break and see you then. We will now wait for some questions. If there are not, thank you very much for your attendance and have a nice day. It was our honor.
The next webinar will be on another link. We gave the link on the support group and on the website. Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.